The Trappist monk, Thomas Merton, was asked perhaps one too many times what life was like in the monastery. What do you wear? What do you do? How do you do your spiritual practices? And he's been quoted as answering maybe a little short. What I wear is pants. What I do is live. How I pray is breathe. Today is all about breath, something so incredibly basic and fundamental that we hardly even notice it. What is most vital is oftentimes unnoticed. I've been fortunate not to have trouble breathing, except for maybe when we were in Colorado and realizing that going up a flight of stairs at 12,000 feet is not 12,000. Is that right? 12,000. Yes, that's way different than going up the stairs here in Des Moines. But besides that, I've been pretty fortunate. Breath hasn't been a problem for me. But I'm guessing that breathing is harder to take for granted for those who struggle. I've been invited into the sacred space of the room to bear witness to a woman who was breathing her final breaths as she was dying of COPD, struggling for every last cumbersome breath. I imagine that those with asthma or cystic fibrosis or those who live in places where the air is polluted can't take breathing for granted. What a privilege our breath is. There was something so beautiful to me this week about this being the week where we're focusing on breath, and it also being one of the windiest weeks that we've had yet. This week, I have been especially tuned into that connection of wind and breath and spirit. And I've spent some time this week walking outside in the sun and the wind, and I could feel the winds of change in the air. The wind ushers in that warmth of spring, and you could kind of feel it this week. Feeling the wind blow through my hair, I couldn't help but imagine a parent God smiling down at me and lovingly rustling my hair as I walked. In the book of Genesis, we read of God's ruach, which is translated spirit or wind or breath. We read of it hovering over the deep at creation. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and the darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Ruach, the spirit, wind, breath of God, moved upon the face of the waters. How beautiful to think of the spirit, wind of God breathing creation into being. In Genesis 2, God breathed the breath of life into dust and animated humankind. The Hebrew word used in that passage is neshama, and it's also translated breath and spirit. In our passage today from Romans, the word is pneuma, which is also translated breath and spirit. In the language of both the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament, breath and spirit are connected. Their words are one in the same. Our breath connects us to other living things. Theoretical physicist Lawrence Krauss has proposed a theory that he says the molecules that we breathe are evenly redistributed in the atmosphere within a number of centuries. And so because of this, he argues that there's a mathematical probability that more than 99 of 100 of our breaths contain a molecule from Caesar, which I would also say from Jesus. I don't know, that's an interesting theory, but at the very least, we can say that every single breath we take has been associated with or connected to another living organism. With our breath, we are connected to the ancient, and we also connect with each other in the present, and our breath will continue into the future. In our passage from Romans today, we read the Spirit breath comes to help our weakness. We don't know what we should pray, but the Spirit breath pleads our case with unexpressed groans. The one who searches hearts knows the Spirit breath and thinks because the Spirit breath pleads for the saints with consistent with God's will. Our breath, our breathing is the language of God, and the Spirit translates for us. Which I think is pretty wonderful because prayer can be rather intimidating. I think that people become anxious about prayer. Will I have the right words? Am I doing it correctly? I work in coffee shops a lot because I take Greta to dance, and then I go to a coffee shop nearby and I work for 2 or 3 hours, and then I go back and pick her up again. So I spend a lot of time working in coffee shops. And as much as I try not to, I overhear a lot of conversations. And just this week, while I was working on my message, I was sitting next to 2 women who were talking about prayer and how to pray correctly. One was kind of coaching the other, and I could hear the anxiety as they discussed. And all the while this discussion was going on, I was reading our passage for today's message, and I was wondering, why on earth would we get so worked up about having the right words? Our breath translates what we need into the language of God. Our breath is communication with the holy. And the beautiful thing to me, as I was hearing these women anxiously discussing how to most effectively pray for the things that they want, I was pondering how breath as prayer is pretty wonderful because it keeps us from mistaking prayer as an act that's something like approaching God as a vending machine. Like, we can pray for whatever we want, and we should pray. We should take whatever we want before God. God is like a parent that desires us to come. We can pray for anything. We can pray for our favorite team to win the game, which I can promise you last night there was a lot of that happening at the state basketball tournament. I was there. We can pray for our favorite show choir to be the grand champion. We can pray for a good grade on a test. We can pray that things go well at work. But ultimately, God is not a vending machine. We express our prayers and we make our desires known to a God who is love and relationship, not because we think that God is going to do everything that we say, but because God desires this intimacy with us, and we desire intimacy with God. The trouble of thinking about God as a vending machine is if God doesn't answer our prayer in the way that we had hoped, we could start to wonder, what were we doing wrong? This was kind of the discussion that was going on with these 2 women. One hadn't been dispensed the husband that she had been praying for, and she was really, really concerned. Was she pushing the wrong numbers? Did she not insert enough payment? Why wasn't this prayer being answered? But our passage from Romans today says that this breath spirit helps us to pray not for what we want, but for what is necessary. So what's necessary? Sometimes when we are in the greatest need, we cannot find the words to pray. And breath is prayer. This spirit breath knows how to pray even when we don't. The spirit breath helps us in our weakness. This spirit breath intercedes with deep, wordless groans. And I love that because these wordless groans connect us with that metaphor of childbirth, which is used in various places throughout the Bible to speak of the hopeful and often painful waiting for holy transformation. So how beautiful is this metaphor as we are listening for that still small voice and finding our own. The Spirit, like a midwife, is helping us to give birth to our true selves. That still small voice is helping us to find our own. The power of breath. Breath as relationship with holy mystery. Breath as connection to all creation. Breath as connection to the Spirit that is deep within us. Breath connecting us with each other. In Polynesian culture, the ha is the breath or breath of life or spiritual power between people. The greeting aloha actually means the breath or spirit of God be with you. Traditionally, Hawaiians would often greet each other by sharing their ha, by sharing their breath. Now, I'm sure that this would not make the appropriate greeting list. The CDC is not going to recommend this right now. It's probably not on the list. But the way that they would greet each other is that they would put the bridges of their nose right next to each other, and they would inhale together. That is so beautiful. They believed that by entering into this together and breathing in this breath of life together, they were welcoming each other into their space and sharing the breath of life. That is beautiful. And then, from another perspective, some rabbis have speculated about the pronunciation of the name Yahweh, one of the names for God in the Hebrew Bible. They've speculated that the Yah is the quiet sound that we make as we inhale, and that the way is the soft refrain that we answer as we exhale. And isn't that beautiful? Breathing as pronouncing God, the name of God. And what if we thought about it that way? If we were constantly, 24/7, even when we're sleeping, day and night, having the name of God on our lips. So let's just try it. We're going to breathe in Yahweh, Yahweh, Yahweh. Isn't that beautiful? When we think about it this way, just the act of becoming conscious to our breath, something that we are doing every moment of every day, pulls us back into the awareness of the ever-present God, and we pray continuously. I appreciate the way that Elaine Heath has answered the question, what is prayer? Elaine answers it this way. Prayer is breathing the life of God, breathing it in, listening to God's love, God's heart, and finding our own truest self in that listening. So, what have you heard in the listening? What do you think of this idea of air and spirit being the same thing? How might our practice of just slowing down and paying attention to our breath help us tune in to constant prayer and constant connection with God? Where do you find yourself in this story this morning? Welcome to the conversation.